Well, aren't you a Bobby Dazzler?
Well, I'll go out on a limb and take that as a compliment.
Most of the time, TV spin-offs feel like a desperate cash grab. A supporting character gets yanked out of a hit show, plugged into a new setting, and the network crosses its fingers that viewers will care. Usually, they don't. The tone is off, the magic is gone, and the whole thing quietly disappears after a season or two. But every now and then, a spin-off doesn't just survive, it thrives. It finds its own voice, its own identity, and sometimes even eclipses the original series that spawned it. That's what we're diving into today. Spin-offs that actually worked, and more importantly, why they worked. What did these shows understand about character, tone, and timing that so many others didn't? How do you branch off from a hit without feeling like a watered-down copy? In this video, we're looking at 10 spin-offs that did it right. Some took side characters and gave them the spotlight. Others shifted genres or tackled themes the parent show only hinted at. All of them proved that a spin-off doesn't have to be a knockoff. So, hit that like button, subscribe if you love a good TV deep dive, and let's count down the rare cases where the spin-off actually nailed it. 10. Maude from All in the Family. We start with a Norman Lear special, Maude. Before she headlined her own show, Maude Finley appeared on All in the Family as Edith Bunker's outspoken, razor-sharp cousin, the perfect foil to Archie's bigotry. In those guest spots, you could already see it. This wasn't just a one-off character. Maude had a fully formed worldview, and B. Arthur had the presence to fill an entire half hour on her own. Maude took the All in the Family formula, hot-button topics, arguments at the dinner table, and cranked the dial toward feminism and progressive politics. Instead of centering a reactionary character like Archie, the spin-off put a liberal, middle-aged woman front and center and asked viewers to deal with her contradictions, her temper, and her ideals. What made it work is that it didn't feel like a clone. The setting, the marital dynamic, even the way Maude approached politics were distinct. The humor was still sharp and topical, but filtered through her anxieties, her menopause, her marriages, and her sense of justice. It was a different angle on the same era. In a TV landscape where spin-offs often feel smaller than their parent shows, Maude proved you could zoom in on one character and actually go bigger with the ideas. 9. Good Times from Maude. Good Times is a spin-off of a spin-off, which already makes it unusual. Florida Evans started out as Maude's housekeeper, a calm, grounded presence in that whirlwind of arguments. When she and her family were spun off into their own series, everything shifted, from a suburban New York household to a Chicago housing project, from political debates over cocktails to the day-to-day reality of making rent. What made Good Times work wasn't just the jokes, though it had plenty of them. It was the way the show blended broad sitcom humor with the harsh realities of poverty, racism, and systemic inequality. James and Florida Evans weren't caricatures. They were parents trying to raise their kids with dignity in a world that didn't make that easy. And then there was JJ. Dynamite caught fire, and suddenly the lanky, goofy son was a phenomenon. That popularity created tension behind the scenes, but on screen it gave the show a unique energy. This mix of gritty subject matter and almost cartoonish comedy. Somehow, it held together. Good Times worked because it gave viewers something they weren't seeing anywhere else. A working-class black family confronting real problems, but still laughing, still loving each other, still pushing forward. It wasn't just Maude in a different house. It was its own story. 8. The Jeffersons, from All in the Family. If Good Times focused on a family struggling to get by, the Jeffersons went in the opposite direction and moved on up. George and Louise Jefferson began as the Bunkers' neighbors on All in the Family, sharp-tongued, ambitious, and constantly butting heads with Archie. The spin-off asked a simple question: what happens when this black business owner actually achieves the American dream? The Jeffersons worked because it dared to show something TV rarely did at the time. an affluent black family living in a luxury high-rise. The show still tackled race, class, and prejudice, but from the perspective of people who'd fought their way into spaces that weren't built for them. George's chip on his shoulder, his stubborn pride, his quick temper, suddenly made sense in a whole new way. Louise, the neighbors, and of course Florence the maid kept things grounded. It wasn't just rich people problems. It was a clash of backgrounds, attitudes, and expectations. The sitcom setups were classic. Arguments over business deals, in-law drama, misunderstandings in the hallway. But the social context made it feel fresh. What really sealed the deal is that the Jeffersons didn't just survive. It lasted a full decade. That's not a spin-off riding the parent show's coattails. That's a series that figured out who it was and stayed true to it. 7. Laverne and Shirley from Happy Days. Laverne and Shirley began with a simple premise. What if those two brash, blue-collar girls who occasionally dated Fonzie got their own show? On Happy Days, Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney were fun guest stars. In their own series, they became the heart of a working girl sitcom that felt both nostalgic and strangely modern. Set in 1950s Milwaukee, the show leaned into slapstick and physical comedy, routine pratfalls, assembly line chaos, and those memorable schlemiel, schlemazel opening credits. But underneath the goofy antics, there was something relatable. Two best friends sharing a small apartment, punching a clock at the brewery, trying to navigate love, work, and adulthood with very limited resources. What made the spin-off work is that it didn't try to be Happy Days with skirts. Richie and the gang were in a more idealized, almost storybook 1950s. Laverne and Shirley's world was messier. They worried about money. They dealt with creepy bosses. They fought with each other, then made up over milk and Pepsi, and audiences connected with that. For a while, Laverne and Shirley even outperformed Happy Days in the ratings. The show had its own rhythm, its own supporting cast, and its own sense of humor. It proved that two side characters, given the right world to live in, could carry a series just fine. 6. The Facts of Life from Different Strokes. The Facts of Life spun out of Different Strokes by following Mrs. Garrett, the Drummond family's housekeeper, as she left New York to become a house mother at an all-girls boarding school. On paper, that sounds like a pretty small move. One supporting character, new job, new kids, but in practice, it created a whole new kind of sitcom. Instead of focusing on one family, The Facts of Life centered on a rotating group of teenage girls, each with her own quirks and insecurities. Blair, Joe, Tootie, Natalie, these weren't just joke machines. They were stand-ins for very real teen experiences. Body image issues, peer pressure, money problems, first love, and all the awkwardness that comes with growing up. Mrs. Garrett became the emotional anchor. She wasn't just a wisecracking maid anymore. She was a mentor, a surrogate parent, and sometimes a referee. That shift in her role is a big part of why the spin-off worked. The show allowed her to be more than a background presence. It let her guide, scold, comfort, and occasionally crack under the pressure. The tone walked a careful line. Yes, it had those classic, very special episode moments, but it also kept things light enough that viewers didn't feel lectured. Over time, audiences grew up with these characters, watching them navigate high school and beyond. That sense of growth, of characters changing in believable ways, is something a lot of spin-offs never manage. The Facts of Life did. 5. Family Matters from Perfect Strangers. Family Matters has one of the sneakiest origin stories on this list. Harriet Winslow was introduced on Perfect Strangers as an elevator operator in the building where Larry and Balky worked. She was a side character, until the network realized there was potential to build a whole family around her. That's how we got the Winslows, a middle-class Chicago family dealing with everyday life. At first, Family Matters was a straightforward family sitcom. It focused on Carl and Harriet, their kids, and the kinds of problems you'd expect. school trouble, sibling rivalry, workplace stresses. It fit perfectly into ABC's TGIF lineup and felt grounded in a way that made it very easy to watch. Then, Steve Urkel showed up. What made Family Matters truly stand out was how it adapted once its breakout character arrived. Urkel, the nerdy next-door neighbor with suspenders, snorts, and catchphrases, could have been a one-note joke. Instead, the show slowly recentered itself around him, while still keeping the family dynamic intact. That balance between heartfelt family moments and increasingly wild, almost sci-fi Urkel plots gave the series a strange but distinct identity. The fact that Family Matters ultimately outlived Perfect Strangers says a lot. The spin-off didn't just survive the parent show, it became the one people remember first. That's the dream scenario for any network executive. 4. Xena, Warrior Princess, from Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. In the mid-90s, syndicated TV was packed with pulpy adventure shows, and Hercules, The Legendary Journeys was one of the biggest. Then along came Xena. Originally introduced as a villain, this fierce, morally complicated warrior, she was too compelling to stay on the wrong side of the story for long. The decision to spin her off into her own series turned out to be a masterstroke. Xena, Warrior Princess worked because it took the familiar mythic world of Hercules and filtered it through a completely different lens. Instead of a charming, muscle-bound hero wandering around saving the day, you had a former warlord trying to atone for her past. The stakes weren't just monster of the week, they were about redemption, guilt, and the possibility of change. The relationship between Xena and Gabriel gave the show its emotional core. Their bond deepened over time, grounding even the wildest plots in something human. One week you'd get slapstick comedy with gods and goofball villains. The next you'd be dealing with heavy questions about violence, forgiveness, and destiny. Visually and tonally, Xena carved out its own space. It was campy, yes, but also surprisingly daring for its time. And thanks to syndication, it built a global cult following that arguably overshadowed Hercules. That's the sign of a spin-off that isn't just borrowing a universe, it's owning it. 3. A Different World, from The Cosby Show. When A Different World premiered, the idea was simple. Follow Denise Huxtable as she leaves the comfort of the Huxtable household and heads off to college. The show was set at Hillman College, a fictional historically black college. And early on, it felt like an extension of The Cosby Show's universe. But then something interesting happened. Lisa Bonet left, and the spin-off had to reinvent itself. Instead of collapsing, A Different World found its voice. The focus shifted to an ensemble cast: Whitley, Dwayne, Ron, Freddie, Kim, and the show leaned into what made its setting unique. Hillman wasn't just a backdrop. It was a way to explore black identity, class differences, and young adulthood in a way network TV almost never did at the time. The topics A Different World tackled were bold: apartheid, the importance of HBCUs, financial struggles, gender dynamics, and the pressure to succeed. But it didn't feel like a lecture. Dorm room pranks, romance, and the everyday chaos of college life kept the tone lively. You could tune in for the laughs and still walk away thinking about something bigger. What really makes A Different World stand out as a successful spin-off is that it stopped feeling like the Cosby spin-off and simply became its own show. By embracing its setting and characters instead of clinging too tightly to its parent series, it carved out a cultural legacy that still resonates today. 2. Angel, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Angel had a tricky task from day one. On Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel was the brooding vampire boyfriend, tragic, mysterious, and often defined by his relationship with Buffy. Spinning him off into his own series meant answering a key question: who is Angel when he's not orbiting around her story? Angel solved that by changing the entire vibe. Instead of a monster-fighting high school drama, we got a supernatural noir set in Los Angeles. Angel becomes a kind of paranormal private eye, helping the helpless while wrestling with a century's worth of guilt. The show leaned into moral ambiguity, long-running story arcs, and a darker, moodier atmosphere than Buffy's quippy teen horror. What made the spin-off work is that it kept the mythology but shifted the focus from coming of age to redemption. The supporting cast, Cordelia, Wesley, Gunn, Fred, Lorne, evolved in surprising ways, often more dramatically than characters in the parent show. The stakes felt huge, not just because of apocalypses and demons, but because the characters were constantly questioning whether they were actually making the world better, or just feeding their own need to feel heroic. Angel proved that a spin-off can share a universe without sharing a tone. It respected where the character came from, but wasn't afraid to take him into much darker, more adult territory. For a lot of fans, it sits right alongside Buffy, not as a lesser echo, but as a companion piece with its own identity and emotional weight. 1. Frasier, from Cheers. Topping the list is arguably the gold standard of spin-offs, Frasier. On Cheers, Dr. Frasier Crane was a supporting character, an uptight, slightly pompous psychiatrist who drank with Norm and Cliff and traded barbs with everyone else. When Cheers ended, spinning him off could have meant more barroom comedy in a new city. Instead, the creators did something smarter. Frasier moves back to Seattle, starts a new career as a radiotherapist, and moves in with his gruff, blue-collar father, Martin. Add in his even snootier brother, Niles, and the quirky physical therapist, Daphne, and suddenly you've got a completely different kind of ensemble. The bar is gone. The tone shifts to highbrow farce and family conflict, with opera tickets and cheap beer colliding in every episode. What made Frasier work so well is that it took one aspect of the original character, his snobbery, his neuroses, and built an entire world that constantly challenged it. Martin's down-to-earth pragmatism, Daphne's eccentricity, Roz's blunt honesty. They all poked holes in Frasier's ego in ways that were both hilarious and surprisingly touching. Critically and commercially, the show was a monster. It racked up awards, lasted 11 seasons, and for many viewers, stands equal to or even above Cheers. That's the ultimate sign of a successful spin-off. When people forget it ever was a spin-off and just think of it as one of the great sitcoms. Conclusion. Looking across these shows, you start to see a pattern. The spin-offs that worked didn't try to photocopy their parent series. They changed the setting, shifted the tone, or zoomed in on a character's inner life in a way the original never could. Maude and A Different World dug deeper into social issues. Family Matters and Laverne and Shirley turned side characters into the emotional core of a new story. Xena and Angel reshaped entire genres while keeping familiar mythologies. And Frasier? It built an entirely new world around an old face. Most spin-offs fail because they feel smaller, thinner, or more cynical than what came before. These shows felt bigger. They took risks, trusted their characters, and gave audiences a reason to tune in that went beyond simple brand recognition. So now it's your turn. Which spin-offs do you think actually surpassed their originals? Drop your picks in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the shows that shaped our screens.